Hey guys, so this is Tommy again. This is my second week in my God Lives In series. And yeah, I'm gonna talk about another topic that I think a lot of people don't think God is involved in or that God can speak through. And this is a little different than last week. Last week was on jazz music, and I was thinking, maybe I could switch it up so like or each 2 weeks, I could take a topic and then kind of reverse it and say, what's the complement of that? So I think the complement to jazz music would be rap music, actually, because it's similar to jazz in certain ways. It has a very consistent beat, just like jazz does, but it's different than jazz in kind of the way it presents itself. Jazz is very sophisticated. The people who play jazz music are very smart and kind of educated, whereas with rap, it's very different. It's people in cities, and it's people who are just angry at the world sometimes, or in general who are a little bit less filtered. They're a little bit more open and honest and just put it all out there. So yeah, it's just a whole different genre, but I think it has its similarities to jazz. So yeah, thinking about how God speaks through jazz, I figured it'd be helpful to look at what's unique about rap music in the first place. So first off, it's very aggressive. I'm not gonna try and make it something it's not. It's the kind of music that you listen to when you're gonna go work out, because it's just very intense and it hypes you up. And because of that, it has a lot of angry messages usually. Also, it's very unfiltered, which is why there's a lot of swearing. The people who rap are usually very open and don't want to hide anything about their lives. They're very true to themselves, which is a great quality. And then it's a very emotion-driven genre. I mean, there is definitely logic to it, and even like the way that rap flows has a lot of logic to it. But usually they're trying to drive at one certain emotion, whether it's trying to get someone really angry or get them really pumped up or excited or something. So yeah, that's another thing about rap music. And then, like I said before, it's very consistent in its beat, and it's always changing. I mean, that's what's cool about it. It's always surprising you. It's always shifting. So that's another thing about rap that I think is unique. Then I was thinking, okay, what are rappers like? Actual rap artists. And I noticed most rap artists, when they rap, talk about their power, whether it's their influence or whatever. If you listen to raps, they're often saying that they're kings or something like that. And I just noticed there's a lot of diction about power. So they're very power obsessed oftentimes. They're shamelessly uncompromising. If they find something they think is true, they never let anyone tell them differently, which I think is really cool. And they're very eloquent. They're very quick on their feet. They know how to think. Even if it's just like snap, 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 if they don't have any time, they know how to just change. I mean, a lot of rappers out there, even if they plan their raps out beforehand, they have in the past done freestyling, because a lot of times that's how you get into the genre. And people that are really, really good have that skill to just kind of jump in and just start talking, start rapping. And I think that's amazing personally. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit about what rap artists are like. They're usually people who grew up with humble beginnings. That's also something about them. Like a lot of them came from gangs or just like the slums or cities or something like that. So yeah, they're not necessarily sophisticated people like jazz, but they tend to have that personality of how do we make people feel a certain emotion and really drive at that one thing. So yeah. What qualities of God are reflected in those characteristics? I believe that, like I said before, since they're so power obsessed, I don't believe God is like power obsessed, but he's extremely powerful. And so I think God's kingship is represented in those rap artists at times, specifically in the way that they talk about how they would rule the world if they could, and just what decisions they would make, stuff like that. Another thing is his holiness. I mean, a rap artist, like, if you listen to their raps, it never sounds like they're just kind of like, oh, okay, like, I guess I'll think this. No, they're like, I believe this and no one's going to stop me from believing this. And I think God is the same way. Nothing can sway him no matter what the circumstances are, and that's awesome. And he's just so set apart, just like rap artists are. A lot of rap artists are even, like, kind of looked down upon, and I think that's something that happens to God, too. And I think we need to recognize that. And another one, like I said before, I think God's anger is really represented in those rap artists. A lot of times they are rapping about real injustices, real things that are bad in the world, and some things that they hate. And the fact that they're so true and open about that is really cool. But I think God feels the same way a lot of times. If you see someone that's homeless on the side of the street and you know that it's because they, couldn't get a job or whatever, the system couldn't handle them, that should make you feel something inside. And wanting to talk about that is not a bad thing. It's just that rap artists do it in such an unfiltered way that people get scared off. And sometimes they don't talk about stuff like that, obviously. But I think if God were to rap, that's what he'd rap about. He'd rap about things that really matter. And I'll get to that later too. But so tonight I'm going to talk about Matthew 23 because I was thinking of doing something from the prophets, because literally anything from the prophets is kind of our rap. It's God speaking through his prophets and saying, this is what's terrible about what you're doing, and this is how you need to shape up, basically, which is really great. But I ended up deciding a verse about Jesus because I just thought of it and it just fits so well. It's Matthew 23, and it's basically the 7 woes that Jesus says about the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were this group of religious officials at the time of Jesus that were just really religious people. And they would try and make everyone follow their rules, even though there was no actual evidence for them from the Old Testament or anything. They were kind of making more rules so that they knew in their heads that they were following what God wanted them to do, when really they were just piling on more and more stuff for them to do. And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that. It happens a lot, especially in the American church, where people will say, this is what God wants for us, so let's do it to the extreme. And let's make everyone just do these things. And it becomes less about the heart and more about what you're doing. Jesus calls them all this stuff, and I'll talk about that. But something he says specifically is, you are whitewashed tombs. And that's so really cool to hear, because it's so direct and so bold, but it's him saying, you're not really true to who you are. You're just washing the outside. You're never looking inward and never really figuring out how I can let God into your heart. You're just trying to figure out, how can I do the right things every day to satisfy him, which is not enough. Really, what God wants from you is a relationship, and that only happens if you truly look inside and look for that pure heart and seek after that. So I'll dive in. So first, I'm going to talk about Matthew 23, 1-4, which says, "Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, 'The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must obey them and tell them and do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift up a finger to move them.'" Okay, so a couple things I noticed. Number one, Jesus doesn't wait to have a conflict with the Pharisees in order to say this. He just starts saying it. And that's something that speaks to me, because a lot of times I will think, maybe I need to just wait for someone that's religious or that wants to because I'm in a position of spiritual authority personally. I'm a leader in Crew, which is a ministry at Chapman University, and I always we come into conflict at times. Not so much at Crew, but I know that it will happen eventually wherever I am, if I'm ever in that position, that someone will think we need to do this and this and this to satisfy God and to appease him. Whereas God's not about what we do, he's about what we are. And hearing Jesus just start saying this and not wait for that conflict to happen is really cool. It's just him saying, look, I'm not okay with this, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to let us just try and make everything be okay and pretend everything's all right, when really there's this problem that we need to, this elephant in the room, and we need to deal with it. So that's one thing I noticed. Another thing is, there's a lot of just religion in these Pharisees that just really bugs me, kind of like I said before, but it hurts other people as well. The fact that it says they tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not lift a finger to help them. I notice that what the decisions they're making are hurting other people. It's not just that they're religious or that they make more than they have to really do themselves, but they also hurt others in doing that because they're in that position of authority. And Jesus hates that. Jesus is like, no, that's not what the gospel is about. That's not what my God, my Father, is about. He's about loving each and every person for who they are. And I totally love that. But the fact that he's so willing to just come up and say it is cool. Okay, so there's a long, long passage where Jesus just goes through 7 woes of the Pharisees and says, this is all the bad stuff that you need to not do, and this is how you need to shape up. Like, do not think that you can just get away with going to church every Sunday, with just not doing anything on Sabbath, like just these things that you're doing. It's not enough for us. Like, for me and God, it's your heart that we're looking for. But I'll pick certain verses because there are a couple that I just really relate to. So the next one is Matthew 23:15, which says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are." It's awesome. I mean, that's so poetic. That's so rap-like to me. It just makes it sound like he's a rap artist saying, "Who do you think you are?" Like, that's not really who you are. Like, you're just grass, you know? Like, you live for maybe 100 years. Like, you can get some stuff done, you know? Like, you get to do some good, some bad, whatever. But really, like, in the big scope of things, do you really think you're that important? And I really love that. It's so humbling. And it takes the responsibility off of us, too, because we realize that if we are just a one little part of that picture, we don't have to change the world ourselves. We can let God change the world and just be a part of that. But the reason why it speaks to me, honestly, is that I see my own darkness in that. When it says, you travel over land and sea to win a single convert. I mean, that was me. I went to Ocean City between my freshman and sophomore year, and it was awesome. I loved it. And I did it for the right reasons. I wanted to truly learn about God and just experience Him. And I wanted people to know the same love that I feel for God. And so we did go sharing our faith just kind of randomly and talk to people about what they thought. And it was never like, I'm going to shove my faith in your face and like make you choose. You know, it was like, not like that. It was much more open, and we had a discussion with them. It was very good. But of course, whenever you're in that situation, especially for an extended period of time, there are those thoughts that enter your mind of, man, like, what if I'm doing this wrong? What if I'm not upholding the gospel the right way? And then you kind of think, it's up to me. Like, I have to be the one to go win converts, the way this says. And the fact that he says, like, you think you're doing the right thing because it sounds like the religious thing. But really, when you actually achieve it, you're going to make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. That speaks to me. I mean, it makes me realize that it's not just about how many people you get to come to Christ. Not that I ever really thought that, but it's about truly just living out the life that God is calling you to live and letting other people see the light that you already have, and decide whether they want to have more of that. So yeah, that just speaks to me, and that's why I thought I'd bring it up. But in general, I think, especially in America, we get a really bad rap of evangelism, which is supposed to be just, oh, like, what do you believe about faith? And people start to make it like their responsibility and say, oh, I need to go win people for Christ. When really, no, Christ is the one that's calling people home, and we're just mediators for that. So yeah, that's Matthew 23:15. And then the reason for that, which I think is really cool, comes in Matthew 23:37. And it shows that God isn't just bold, but He's bold for a purpose. And I think you'll know what I mean in a second. So this is what it says. "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." So this is where Jesus really says, look, like, you've been killing the prophets. You're going to kill me. I mean, He knows that already. You stone those sent to you. But how often have I longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks? I mean, that just shows how much He loves them. It's not even that He's just mad at the Pharisees and wants them to die. It's not like that. It's like, what are you doing? I mean, that's not who you are. I know there's so much more for you. And this is where you see, like, He's being bold because He knows there's no other way they're going to hear Him. This is the best chance He has of reaching them and of saying, look, like, you think you're doing the right thing, but you don't know me. You don't know God. And that's so cool. That God isn't just angry and angry and angry for no reason. But we have a God that's slow to anger and abounding in compassion, and he wants people to know him. Even the people who are leading others away from Christ, he wants them to know him. And there's no point when someone becomes too far gone, where someone isn't loved by Christ or lovable by Christ. And that's just so cool. So even these people that he spends an entire chapter of the Bible ranting about, at the end he says, look, like, I want you to be the one to gather my chicks. Like, I want you to be my friend. And I just think that's awesome. So yeah, that's the passage I wanted to go through. Closing thoughts. Modern rap artists are actually really cool. A lot of people give them a bad rap, like I said before. But if you look at the popular ones, I've noticed that there's like this common thing where the really, really good ones, who everyone listens to, they have some songs about like, oh, like, I don't know, money, sex, women, like whatever. But then they have some really good songs where they talk about real problems. Kendrick Lamar is a great example. I've been listening to him a lot recently since Black Panther came out. He's really great. But seriously, like, people think of him as just like that rapper who, I don't know, is a gangster and like always talks about whatever. But his latest album before Black Panther is called Damn, and it's amazing. It's basically where he talks about his theology and like there's this whole, like, I forget what it is, like thing where people have seen this conspiracy where if you listen to the album frontways, then I forget which order it is, but if you listen to the album all the way through one way, then basically he's saying people are sinful because of wickedness. That is to say, like, they're sinful because of something inherent in them and they can't stop it. And if you listen to it the other way, then people are weak in their sin. So that is to say, people are sinful because they decide to be weak, because they decide to be sinful. So one is like, oh, like, they're inherently sinful, and the other is like, oh, they're kind of sinful because they choose to be. And he's just asking this question, like, which one is it? Like, the whole album, which is so cool. And there's so many, like, facets to that. But what I think about that is that it shows that he's not just answering questions, but asking them. And that's what a lot of rap is. And that's what a lot of the Bible is. It's God saying, who are you to say such things? What are you doing with your life? Things like that. Things that are just really bold and almost, I don't know, just seem wrong to ask. But he asks them because he wants to drive to the heart of what we think. And sometimes the only way to do that is through bold questions like that. So personally, I think with the whole like weakness thing, that it's both. That sure, like, people have that inherent wickedness, that sin in their heart, but we also choose to follow that. And I think that sin comes in both forms. But I think Jesus delivers us from both. And not to say that I don't sin, but he helps us to, like, learn about our sin and to fight it off with his power. And through his Spirit, we grow in faith and trust God with our sin to destroy it inevitably. So instead of us trying to say, I'm not going to sin anymore, I'm going to decide not to, it's not that simple. It's more like, Jesus, like, I'm not strong enough. I'm still too weak for this. But if you come and hold my hand, we can do it together. That's what I think. But yeah, that's my thoughts about modern rap artists. There's also like Chance the Rapper and Eminem and people like that, but they're all like great. And I think the really good ones, if you really look for it, have serious messages. You just have to filter through all the like swearing and random stuff. There is a lot of that. So yeah, don't judge a book by its cover. Rap has its merits. It might not be for every situation. Probably shouldn't play it when your grandma's in the room or whatever. But in the same way that maybe rap doesn't always fit with the situation, I think anger has its place too. And God gets angry just as we do at the things that are unjust about the world. It's not that he created this world wanting it to be just like this. He created it to be perfect. But it was us who turned away. And that's why he's fighting sin so hard. And fighting it through us as well. And that's a whole other thing that we could get into in another talk. But thank you guys for listening. Feel free to subscribe or like or whatever YouTube people do. Yeah, thank you very much.